the stories you probably haven't heard from Ferguson, Missouri. For days now, newsrooms like this one have been standing by, waiting for some sort of word from the grand jury that is deciding whether to charge Ferguson officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. Frankly, I think some people, some officers, some protesters, some journalists are getting impatient. A local critic of the national coverage is standing by, and so is a lawyer who's making sure that no more reporters get arrested. Remember that from back in August, a number of reporters arrested? There are some claims that a reporter was also arrested last night, so we'll get into that and try to check it out. But first, let's get an update from Ferguson. CNN's Sarah Seidner is joining me live. Sarah, can you tell us the latest sense of timing about when we may hear something from the grand jury, from the prosecutor's office?
Look, I want to speak to some of what you talked about. Evan Perez had some great sources. He's been coming out and saying the timing is perhaps Friday. Maybe it's going to happen Sunday. Now, he has reported that his sources say that the grand jury did not finish and they are going to resume on Monday. There is a lot of frustration here, as you might imagine. I mean, let's think about this. This is perhaps one of the longest grand juries in history. It's been 3 months, basically, that they have had a hold of this case. And a lot of people don't understand why it is taking so long, but this is a very different scenario. Very different. They are basically being asked to investigate far more than any grand jury normally does. They have a very low threshold. All they have to decide is whether they think that perhaps a crime was committed, and then it's up to the judicial system. It's up to the prosecutors and a jury of their peers to decide whether to convict or not. And so I think there's just a lot of confusion on people's part as to why this is taking so long. There is also a lot of frustration about our coverage, I will admit, because people get frustrated when they get worried and nervous that, oh my gosh, today is the day. You do not know how many emails I get from people who live here, residents, saying, I just heard that you guys said today is the day, and I'm wondering, I'm worried, is it true? And so I think one thing that we need to mention is that the sources who are talking don't actually know the exact timing of this, because the only people who know are those people who are on the grand jury, and they are not supposed to be talking, Brian.
That's crucial. You know, to be honest with you, Sarah, I've gotten some complaints from other journalists saying, why is CNN, why are other television networks hyping these possible, deadline days for the grand jury? But it seems to me no one truly knows, and as long as we make that clear in our coverage, in our banners on the bottom of the screen, then it does seem appropriate to be telling people we are expecting news soon. We just don't know quite when. Is that right?
I think that's really fair, because the truth is, like I said, there are 12 people that know exactly where they are and how long they think this might take. None of them are supposed to be talking. So all of this is people who are saying, okay, I know they're meeting now, okay, I think it might happen. I think we do need to be careful, though, with this idea of hyping. This community is already on pins and needles. They have been nervous for months, and they are tired of it. They want, as they have said to me many times, to rip the Band-Aid off and give us a decision so that we can go forward with our lives, so that the city can start to try and deal with whatever that aftermath is, Brian.
Sarah, stand by and let me add another voice into this conversation. Frank Absher, he's a local media critic, the founder of the St. Louis Media History Foundation. Frank, there have even been some complaints, some claims in recent days that networks like CNN want some violence to happen, want riots to break out after this result comes down. What is your view in St. Louis of the national media coverage of this story? I think we don't have Frank yet, so let me turn to another guest I have standing by, also in the area, Benjamin Lipman. He's a lawyer in St. Louis. He specializes in media issues, and he has represented some of the journalists who, as I mentioned, were arrested while covering the protests back in August. Now he's helping news outlets preserve their rights in these situations. Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I want to go back in a moment to that issue of violence, but let me ask you about this issue of arrests. What are you doing on the ground to make sure the reporters can cover protests freely?
We have done a number of different things. First is dealing with talking to law enforcement ahead of time, trying to explain what we think are the rights of the reporters under the First Amendment, in the hopes that we can get ground rules, I guess, so everybody's in agreement what the reporters can and can't do. Then, excuse me, in the rare circumstances, if a reporter is arrested, all you can do is try and communicate with law enforcement, or whether it's the judge or the prosecutors, to try and get them out as quickly as possible, and then deal with the fallout afterwards. Unfortunately, when you're talking about covering protests where everything is so fluid and there's so much going on at the time, there's not really the opportunity to stop and discuss it when it's happening, and it really comes down to trying to get ground rules ahead of time and then deal with it in the aftermath.
We're showing some pictures from one of the arrests of a photographer that happened in August. But there was a report last night. The St. Louis County Police say they took one reporter from Washington into custody. The name is Trey Yingst. The tweet from the St. Louis County PD says he was taken into custody for failure to disperse. He was asked to leave the street by the commander and refused. I want you all to know I reached out to Trey. He just wrote back to me. He says for this time he cannot do an interview for legal reasons, he says. But he did write on Twitter he says he was just exercising his First Amendment rights trying to cover the story. This is actually what he wrote last night, saying that he was just exercising his First Amendment rights on a public sidewalk. So the controversy there is whether he was on the sidewalk or in the street, it seems like. He's an example of a reporter who is in town, not from a national, big-name media outlet, but someone on the ground there trying to cover it, identifying as a journalist. And I wonder, Ben, if you've got some issues there on the ground about people who aren't from the New York Times or CNN, may not have that kind of press credential to show a police officer, but say they are journalists. Last week I had Bassem Masri on the program. He's a live streamer, who holds his phone up and records protests, even as he sometimes provokes the police. How does the definition of journalist play into this issue?
Well, I mean, from a constitutional standpoint, the definition of journalist shouldn't play in. From a practical standpoint, it sometimes does, because I think that the law enforcement understands that the press has a role in this, and if somebody is displaying press credentials, I think that goes a long way. We certainly encourage our clients to have their press credentials handy and showing, because I think the police do give them some leeway to do their jobs. But the Constitution protects all of us to be in public places and to watch what's going on and to record it if we want to. If any person, whether journalist or not, is standing on a public sidewalk and not interfering in any way with law enforcement, then they should have a right to go ahead and stand there whether they're filming or not.
Sarah, let me bring you back into this conversation, because I mentioned a couple minutes ago this issue of some people at home perhaps thinking that the media wants violence to happen. This is a tweet from Gwen Eiffel of PBS over the weekend. She said, "Is it just me, or is it beginning to seem like some folks will be disappointed if there are not riots in Ferguson?" Have you heard some of that same criticism, and what is your point of view, Sarah, about that? It seems to me that we don't want violence, but we do want some sort of resolution. Journalists are waiting for some sort of resolution here.
I've absolutely heard some of that criticism. And I think for a lot of people in watching this, they feel like it is being hyped up and talked about far too much. But some of that is coming from the response from people who are here. I can tell you, we've seen in our own hotel folks who have come in from out of town who have brought their phones and are ready to record, and they have all their equipment to come out and take part in this. And there's a really big conversation going on right now. I can only speak for myself. I can tell you I've now been in this community for more than 2 months now. And I would hate to see something happen here that's destructive. The people and the places I have gone in this town, they are wonderful people. And I'm talking about those who are here protesting from Ferguson, those businesses that are here who are serving the people of Ferguson, even some of the city officials in Ferguson. Everyone is talking about this, but I have met some wonderful, wonderful people here, and it breaks my heart to sort of see them in this level of fear that they've been living with for a few months now. So in my estimation, I would hate to see something go wrong here. What I do want to see, and what everyone wants to see, is some kind of resolution. What is that grand jury deciding? And then let's go forward from there. Honesty is really important. This has brought up a huge issue in this country, and I think that's fair to say that there is an issue between African Americans and police. I don't think there are many people that dispute that, but there's a way to deal with it, and a lot of folks here are hoping it's dealt with in a very peaceful manner. And to be clear, it has been mostly peaceful. There are some folks who come and stand in the middle of the street and bait police, but for the most part, over more than 100 days, we've only seen a couple of arrests. So I think we need to keep that in mind. There has been no looting, no burning down anything, no destroying anything over these past 90 or so days. There were some issues in the very beginning, Brian.
Thank you, Sarah. And let's underscore that point you were making. This is not just about Michael Brown anymore. The logo on screen might say the death of Michael Brown, but this is about a movement now. I think you would agree with that. This is about a movement, not just that one moment in time. Well, Ben Lippman and Sarah Seidner, thank you both for being here. I'm sorry we couldn't get Frank Apsher in. We'll try to bring him back next week.